the project overall is going to be called Trail Run. It's a proposed mixed-use development over on Route 83 or Talcottville Road. I'm sure people are familiar with the site, and Len has briefly set it up geographically, but I'll talk a little bit about the existing conditions out here. Area was referred to as Lyman Farms in days past, and it was used for active farming purposes. A period of time in the past, they changed use on this and it became essentially a gravel pit, and they mined gravel essentially from maybe about 100, 150 feet back down toward the wetland area here. I apologize, Commissioner Clay, if I'm standing in the way of the board. So gravel has been mined out through this area, as noted, about 150 feet back down to the wetland area. So it no longer serves any value for farming purposes. Groundwater is still well below the surface here, 15, 20 feet down. And the soils are particularly well suited. There's still underlying gravel here. It is in a preferred aquifer area. It's not in an aquifer itself, but it's in a stratified drift. And of course, we have the Hockanum River back here, a wetland associated with it. And it is a very nice resource. So when we began to look at this project, one of the goals of the developer here was to develop a mixed-use project. And I don't believe I know of another mixed-use project that exists in Vernon today. And they wanted to do something that was a little more unique and combine a commercial component with the residential component here. We looked at a number of various different schemes for trying to incorporate the commercial internal to the residential component. And ultimately, because of the commercial corridor and the nature of it here, it just made a lot more sense as we began looking at this site to work towards strengthening the commercial corridor here and try to make something that was a little bit different for the community from an aesthetic standpoint, and use that as a transition back here to the residential area. In addition, working with the developer, we had soil scientists out here flagging the wetlands, looking at the quality of the wetlands, the quality of the Hockanum River, and the resources there, and we communicated with the developer at length over this project that in our opinion it was imperative to preserve these wetland areas here. And in fact, the developer agreed in the process, if we could find a way to meet, in part, the economic needs, meet the number of units on the site, that he would concur with absolutely zero development within the wetlands or the regulated area. So the plan you see here in the back shows the 100-foot upland review area. There's absolutely no development taking place within that. It's perfectly preserved. In fact, in some of the areas in excess of the upland review area is being preserved. I will later in the presentation talk a little more about this. Mr. Chairman, if it meets your expectations, I'd like to talk about the existing conditions here for a while. This will be a fairly long presentation. I don't know if you'd like me to stop on the site plan, take questions, move on to traffic and feasibility, stop and take questions, and then move on to the architectural side, or if you'd like me to work my way entirely through it to your desires, Mr. Chairman. Okay. The overall site plan is shown here. Rod, if you have the handouts, Mr. Chairman, if Rod Swicky may approach the commission, we have individual handouts so that you're not restricted just to looking at the board up there. I selected handouts from the boards that we will be using tonight for you. There's not every board that I am using here tonight within the handout. It would be a stack of paper a half-inch thick. So I selectively went through and picked what I thought would be the most pertinent exhibits for you. As Rod is passing these out, Rod is the principal designer on this project from an engineering standpoint. He's been involved in the project since day one when I initiated it. And if I get stuck on a technical question, he's my backup here tonight. So given the concept that we wanted to preserve the wetland Hockanum River area back here, And we have a strong commercial corridor. It's decided to strengthen the corridor itself with a retail commercial component and set the residential community in between the conservation area, what will become a conservation area, and utilize this commercial area here as a transition zone. You can see it's heavily landscaped to separate the commercial from the residential back here. In total, we are proposing 300 units here. These are high-end units. It's a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. This is not moderate or housing or otherwise. It's not intended for families. It's really intended for younger urban professionals who do not want to be in downtown Hartford in that area and who want to be in an area that have resources available to them, be it things like linear parks as well as nearby shopping centers and convenience. And they want to be in a nice area where they have recreational capabilities within their housing complex itself. In addition to the 300 units here, be it 181 bedroom and 122 bedroom, there's a clubhouse and pool facility over here. It's very elaborate. You'll see some of the architectural elements associated with the clubhouse. And I will show you actual photographs of one being constructed. Projects similar to this actually under construction now in Fairfield County in Shelton. Similar in size. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the commercial component working with it in that particular area. Looking at the site, we tried to create in reserve areas here a significant green space for recreational and passive recreation for the community itself in here. You can see a large green area in here. It's the center of the complex. Walking paths, dog walking, places to play frisbee, things of that nature for the residents within here. We have entire circulation around the site from a public health and safety standpoint. We're able to maneuver fire trucks. Actually, we have the town templates for the fire trucks. We can maneuver the fire trucks throughout the site here very conveniently. We are providing sufficient parking for the site, and we do meet the zoning regulations with respect to that, both with respect to the commercial and residential side. We do have an area in here that will be shared parking where there will be a cross easement to supplement the commercial, and also it's intended to supplement the clubhouse. There will be clubhouse activities when some of the members of the apartments are using it, where they may have guests over, things of that nature. We don't want them parking within the commercial area and using their parking spaces. So we've provided ample parking, particularly in this clubhouse area, so that there is no conflict in parking between the residents themselves here and the commercial patrons over here. In keeping with the context-sensitive design for this area, we want a sustainable community overall. This is going to be here for years to come. Stormwater design on the site tried to pay very close attention to incorporating low-impact development techniques, as well as a systems that would be relatively low maintenance so that they will work well into the future. If you look at the plan you have in front of you, you'll see these hatched areas outlined here. Those are stormwater rain gardens, where water will be infiltrated directly back into the groundwater. Down toward the back of the site here, we have 3 detention areas, where once again, stormwater in larger flows, larger storm events, will ultimately be stored in these areas, and it will infiltrate back into the groundwater. We understand we're in an area that is suitable for recharge, and it's a preferred aquifer area within the town. So we want to protect the water that we're putting down into the ground, as well as ensure we do as much recharge as possible. Drainage report shows that up to a 10-year storm will essentially be recharging a 10-year storm back into the groundwater with no runoff whatsoever, moving itself down toward the Hockenham River. And that's obtained by using a combination of the rain gardens here. For example, we're taking roof water from the roof, which is clean runoff immediately, putting it into the rain gardens and allowing it to percolate back down into the ground. Where we cannot get water from the rooftops into the rain gardens, we're putting it into a pipe system and infiltrating it through chambers back directly into the groundwater. Stormwater runoff that contains or may contain deleterious material, for example, some salt during the wintertime, sands and things of that nature, will be carried through a closed storm drain system and ultimately discharged into these basins here, where it will have an opportunity to, for the sediments, sands, things of that nature, to settle out, and the water will be able to recharge back into the groundwater. A couple things on the plan. They're small, but I'd like to point them out. We do have a couple maintenance sheds proposed on the site for maintenance purposes solely. They're lawnmowers, things of that nature, trying to store some of the materials that are used on a daily basis on the site. And the clubhouse area up here, if you look at the pool area, we do not do a detailed design of these pool areas at this point. It's a very expensive process, and it's a very detailed process, and it's unique for each site. The pool area in this area is typically detailed sometime prior to construction. We'd certainly be happy to come back with the plans for it, but it incorporates pool seating areas, and I do have a graphic of one that is under construction at present that I'll bring forward later in the presentation. With that, I believe we are fully zoning compliant. We did have an error that was pointed out by the planner where we had misidentified a side yard as a front yard. Of course, going to the appropriate side yard is less restrictive than showing a front yard there, and we'll certainly accommodate that and make that change on our final plans. We did see some of the comments back. We're fully capable of meeting, I believe, all the comments that have been provided to date, be it from the engineering department, fire department, planning department, and otherwise. One note would be the comments from the Soil Conservation Service regarding the soil erosion control for the site. They did note that we did not provide a phasing plan for soil erosion control during construction. There's a reason for that. This site, because of its size and nature, is going to have to go into DEP for a SWIP prior to implementation of construction. And typically we defer developing the phasing plans for soil erosion control until we're ready to submit the SWIP. So ultimately, those phasing plans will be developed and they will be reviewed by the DEP or self-certified by a third-party engineering group in accordance with the new regulations out there. So it is our intent to provide those plans, but once again, we didn't necessarily think it was prudent or pertinent to provide them as part of the planning and zoning submission, as it was not required within your regulations. With that, Mr. Chairman, I hope I covered all the salient points. We are zoning compliant based on the special permits that are required for this site. Of course, when you look at the special permits that we are requesting, the list seems very long, but the regulations themselves for this site, virtually every activity that one could think of requires a special permit on this site. They're very well thought out regulations that provide the commission a great deal of ability to regulate how the site is developed. And we do believe that we're fully satisfying the intent of those special permits and providing a community and development that will fit well within the community here. With that, Mr. Chairman, I can turn it back to you for specific site plan questions.